Okay, we should be live. Let's see. Some technical difficulties in the beginning, like normal. Okay, let's start coding. So this week we've been going through DOM. We've been going through events, event handling and functions. And we also did some tasks. Let me just get the lesson 3 up here. So in lesson 3 we studied functions, document object models and events. So the browser, all these elements here that you see, this input field here, this button, these links, this sidebar and this content, they're all part of the DOM or the document object model. And the document object model will provide some interfaces, some APIs for us to use. And we can manipulate the DOM and the whole website through using JavaScript. We can edit content, we can add content, we can remove content, we can change the style, we can react to some events such as clicks, scrolling, mouse movement and all of that. So for example, here as I move my mouse, as I click, events will happen. And if I open the console, you should be able to see all the events happening. So let me just write document add event listener. So we're gonna start listening to some events right away. I'm gonna listen to the mouse move event and I'm gonna console log every time when something happens. I'm gonna console the event that's coming from the browser, from the mouse movement. So as you see, as soon as I start moving my mouse over the top on the page, you will see lots of events happening. And these events are happening even if I don't add an event listener. It's just that the browser is constantly sending events, and as soon as I start listening to them, I can catch the events and do some actions based on that. For example, for mouse movement event, normal way of doing or common way of doing something would be to track where the mouse is and then, for example, draw an icon following the mouse. Not gonna do that today, but maybe next stream. Let's see. So we've been going through some functions, how to define a function. We went through 3 different ways of defining a function. The function declaration with the keyword function, which is hoisted to the top of the source code. Function expression, which is not hoisted. And then arrow function expression, which is the ES6 way of defining arrow function, because we have an arrow here. I'm gonna add one more event to this page, so you will see me scrolling. So event listener 4, I think I have it here, so I'm gonna just be a bit lazy and just use tab to autocomplete. And now I should also get events when I'm scrolling. A scroll event is useful when you're trying to, for example, see if we are at the bottom of the page or at the top of the page. You could check the window scroll position when scrolling, and if we are at the bottom or at the top, we could show, for example, some sort of icon here showing that we are moving or that we can go back to the top. That's one possibility. But as you see, events happening all the time. And let's listen to the resize event as well. So again, I'm gonna be a bit lazy because I had these event code here already, so I'm just gonna reuse these. So now you see events happening, mouse event and scrolling, and resize should also. And notice how resize adds scroll events from time to time as well. Just gonna zoom out a bit. So when I'm resizing, sometimes a scroll event happens because the website content gets moved around a bit and the browser has to scroll a bit. So as you see, lots of events firing all the time. Okay. So here we have these couple of examples, and I brought out this getSum function. This getSum gets two values and just adds them together and returns the outcome. Notice that there's no return statement. That's completely fine. If we only have one statement, we don't need a return statement at all, because then the JavaScript engine will know that the value will be returned as the outcome of this function. So if I copy paste this code and call getSum with, let's say, 3 and 4, it should give me 7. That's good. And if I say getSum 3, 4, and let's put another 3, so I want to have the sum of 10, but it's still returning me 7. That's because as we have defined these functions, I'm just gonna scroll a bit back up, maybe, yeah, so we can see the sum function here. So this function only takes 2 arguments, but we can pass as many arguments as we want. We can pass 1000 arguments, for example, but in the function definition we only care about the first 2 values. So we don't know what to do with the other values. If we want to do this, we would have to pass some sort of list, some sort of array for this function. And we can just change the code a bit. So here we have a function that takes in an array of values, so values, and returns the result value, which is the sum of all values that have been passed. So here we first initialize the value, the result to be 0, and on each iteration, for each of the item on this array, perform this function, and in this function we only increment the result number with the value that we have in this list. This for each will be calling a callback function, which is this one. It will be calling this function for all the values in the list, and when we are out of the list, or we are at the end of the list, it stops executing because we have iterated through the whole list. And at that point we will continue with the source code execution going forward and going to the return result statement. And then we should have the value of all values in the list. So if I copy paste this code here, and I would say getSum of all, and let's give it the value of 3, 4, and 3 again, and now we should get 10. But as you notice, we ended up getting an error saying values.forEach is not a function. Even though we have passed values here and we call it, it says values.forEach is not a function. And notice how I only have one argument here in this function statement. That means that the first value that we give the function is the only value that we care about. And this rest we don't care about at all in this function. And how can I fix this then? Well, I know that the .forEach is a method for an array, so I can just edit my code a bit so that instead of passing 3 numbers, I'm gonna pass one array. So notice now, this is now one value which contains multiple values, but it's still one value. So one value, one argument. The argument is an array, and here we are calling for each of the values in this values list, we are calling the callback function which increments the result value, and then we get number 9. So if we wanted to get number 10, I just change the first one to be the correct number. And if I look at the array, so I'm just typing array, those brackets, and then a dot, we will see lots of different kind of methods. So these methods are built-in functions, built-in functionality for arrays. And here you will see, for example, .reduce, that I'm gonna use shortly. We've used for each. We could use join, for example, to create some sort of string. We could get some keys. Map is also iterating the list, so map is useful when you want to do something for all the values and return a new value, new list, new array. So in a way, you're transforming the array, but map will not manipulate the original array. Instead, it will return a new value with some changes. And pop and push are things that we have already used. So push is one value or multiple values to the end of the list, end of the array, and then pop takes that last value, removes it, and returns that value. Reverse reverses the list, and then we had shift and unshift, where, for example, unshift we can push values to the beginning of the array. But I'm gonna show you reduce. Reduce is fun. We can take a list of values and reduce it down to, for example, a number. And that's exactly what we're gonna do next. So as I'm scrolling a bit down, this is now a refactored version of the same function that we had earlier. So I'm gonna write it here using a bit different name. Const get reduced sum. For example, this name might not be the optimal name, but it's something. And for this I define an arrow function, and in values I know that it's gonna be an array. So I'm just gonna reduce it, and then we should have the get sum function here that we defined earlier. We don't have to do the sum function again because we know that we already have it. And then with the comma, I'm gonna give the reduce an initial value, meaning that initial value will be the first value, and then this initial value will be incremented to the outcome. It's the same as having the result equals 0 and then doing the for loop to change the value, to increment the result. So now, if I call this. So you notice that this is 10, but if I use our new reduced sum function, you notice that it's doing the exactly same thing. So for example, if I define an array and put whatever values into it, let's put some more values and let's end it at 0 for some reason. Now if I say cat sum of all my array, you notice that this is now the outcome of this function call. And if I pass the same value, same variable to my new function, my reduce function, we get the same value. I can even compare these two. My array equals get reduced sum of my array. And now you will see that they are always true, no matter what the array content is. It is the same result coming from both of these functions. That's simply, oh no, where did it go? That's simply because I refactored this function with by using the reduce method of arrays. So you can see that you can simplify things. So first you get it working, first you get some code working, and then when you know how it works and you know what it should return, you can start simplifying it and then refactoring it to a more simple form. Of course, this would require for you to know the existence of reduce, and also to know that you can pass functions as arguments, and you would know how reduce works and how what kind of values do you pass for the reduce method. The same outcome can be achieved using multiple different approaches. I could do this with the for loop, with the while loop, with the for off loop, the while do loop, and the for each. As long as it's giving me the same output on the same input, so meaning the return statement returns the same value for every similar arguments, then it doesn't really matter what the implementation is. Some implementations might be a bit faster, some might use a bit more or a bit less memory, but usually, for example in JavaScript, we are not that concerned with performance and not that concerned with memory, because we're not usually working with large amount of data in JavaScript. Of course there are exceptions, and in those cases you will have to think about the performance. But now, as we're just learning how to write code, let's just first learn how to write code and then think about those aspects later. Okay, so document object model. For example, I'm getting all these events now. I registered this event listener to the document object model, to the document itself, and to the window. The DOM represents the document itself, the HTML document that has been loaded into the browser and rendered in some way. The document object model contains lots of nodes, and each node represents one element on that page. The node, or it represents part of the element. We have element node, we have string node, we have attribute node. We can interact with the browser using DOM. We can add more elements, we can remove elements, we can add event listeners, we can remove event listeners, we can change the style of a website, and we can do all sorts of stuff with the DOM. Here we have the representation of the DOM document. The whole website lives inside the document. Then we have HTML as the root element. We have some children elements for the root, which have their own children elements. And for example, this element will have text and attribute nodes as well. So these are all nodes, and this image is representing this small piece of HTML. So root element, it's the root node. It has two children nodes, head and body. Head will have one children node, and that children node will have the text attribute of my title. And body will have two children nodes, and these two are now siblings because they have the same parent node. So we have parent, children, and sibling nodes. They describe the relationships between different nodes. Each node will have exactly one parent, except for the root, which has none. Nodes can have any number of children and any number of siblings. Of course, with this root having the exception that it cannot have any siblings. It is only a parent to the other nodes. We can access the DOM and do all sorts of stuff with JavaScript. So let me just reload so we get rid of the scrolling and mouse movement events. So let's interact with this site a bit. I'm just gonna get all the links, document, query selector, all, and let's get all of these link elements, all link nodes, and that's then loop these. So let's see if we can loop it with using the for of syntax. Let's call that link of links, link dot style dot color equals red. So if this works, we are changing all the links to red. So you can now see all of these links, and each one of them are now red. I can do the same thing and change these to be blue, or I can change them to be green, or I can change them to be transparent. That's fun. So now you cannot see any of these links. I can change them to be white, so some of the links will be visible but not all. And let's change them to orange. So now we have orange links which might or might not be visible from your browser. Then I can also attach, using the same for of syntax, I can attach some event listeners to these links. So each link now represents one node. Each of these is one node, and each of these nodes will have all of these and a lot more of methods. One being the add event listener that we've been using. And let's just say mouse over, and I want to make a function that always outputs the console the target, for example, event target event dot target, And now every time when I'm hovering over a link, you see that I get the exact target that I am hovering. And again, we are getting lots of events here. And these are happening even if you don't add a listener. So as you can see, we have changed the color to be orange and added an event listener for mouse movement, mouse over. And notice how sometimes I get the target of an SVG, sometimes I'm getting target of the link itself. That's because I'm sometimes scrolling over some elements that are children elements to the link, but the event is still happening. So I get as the target, I get the children element, the specific element that I am hovering. And notice how when I hover anything else that is not a link, nothing happens here in the console. So I can move my mouse here, and whenever I'm moving over a link, you notice that an event is happening. So we have all kinds of events and event handling. Gonna skip a part here because in a moment I'm gonna start working on some of these tasks, so these will become clear. And I'm gonna continue working with events as well. But as you notice, there are many targets of events. They are the elements, for example these. Then we have the document itself and the window, browser window. And there are lots of events in JavaScript, and there should be a link here going to the exact MD and documentation for events. That's worth checking out. And notice how we have the color orange here in the style. That was the style that we defined. We could also define some other styling. Let's say font weight to be bold. So now all the links are a bit bolder than before. Let me just see if there's any questions in the chat. Nothing at the moment, that's okay. So we have some examples here about how to get this specific my div and then adding an event listener to this specific node. So we have the click event listener here as well. And here's an example of the event object. But as you've seen already, we're getting lots of information from the event, and if you look at these links, you will find a bit more information about events. You will find all the events that the browsers support and send, and when you click, for example, this event here, you will see the specific properties it has, and notice that it inherits properties from event and UI event. So inheritance, that's the topic of tomorrow's and next week's lessons. So here we have already a small example of inheritance. And if we go back and look at some other events, let's say a mouse event, we will see the mouse events properties here, and also again message that it's inheriting some events. And here you might see some that are familiar already from me moving the mouse. These events won't be on, for example, on the key down if we're listening to the user's input, keyboard input, but these will be visible on the mouse movement, and vice versa. There's nothing here that's specific for the keyboard. There might be some that are similar, but both of those event types implement their own events, also inherit the events themselves. Okay, I'm gonna close that. I'm gonna jump into these exercises that we have this week. So, first task is to create an HTML page which contains an ordered list with some countries, let's say 5 or more, and an empty paragraph to display some related information. And on task 2, we will start populating that paragraph with some information. But in this first task, we are just adding some values to the list, to the page, removing some, and changing the color, for example. So I'm gonna move my browser here to the side. Keep the specifications open so I can move between these tabs. I have a very simple page already here for today that I will be updating based on these information. So first, let's create an unordered list, which is UL, and then I'm gonna use this nice emmet syntax to create 5 IL elements. And let's say we have some countries here, Finland, Sweden, and let's put Norway here as well. Then we could put Germany and Denmark, for example. Now as I updated this, or I saved, you see it's updated here. So now I'm gonna move to the stream. If I command click this, it should open my file. I can say console log hello. So let's see, I don't have console open, so I'm gonna open that. Hopefully it opens up at some point. And the console as well. So now we have the word hello coming from here. So the specification said here that we should have 5 countries. That's what we have added here, UL with 5 LI elements. And now the first assignment is to remove the third item from the list. So 1, 2, 3. Let's remove Norway. And you remember, if we think this as an array, then we would have Norway at index 2, because arrays start from index 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Even though we have 5 items, the last index is index 4. So I'm just gonna write it here. Array indexes start at 0. The last index is array.length minus 1. Good. Alright, so let me go to the stream.js that I have opened here, and I'm gonna start writing some code. I'm gonna get the third value from this list, for example, because that was what we wanted to remove. And I'm gonna create a function to remove it. Why I'm gonna create a function? Then I can reuse the same code without duplicating that code. And I can reuse it with different arguments. And that's the power of functions. So let's create a function called remove country. And for this, I'm gonna give the variable I, or let's call it an index. That's an even better one. And let me just get the value here. So const count trees equals document get elements by tag name, and here I'm gonna call the li elements, and let's just console log that we have our count trees. And as I save, it should give me a list of countries. But as you see, it's not doing anything. Even if I'm saving, you only see it's changing. That's because I'm not calling this remove country yet. So let's call that immediately, just to see that if this works or not. Okay, so we have an HTML collection with nothing in it, but when I click this open, we have something in it. That's good. Good. So now I'm gonna remove the country in index 2, which is the third index, third country, so Norway. So we are gonna say goodbye to Norway. Countries remove index. Or was it remove child? Let's see, countries remove is not a function. Let's see, remove, it should be. Nope, that's because it's not a method. It is, we have to call the specific index. So then we can call the remove, and now it should remove it. But, oh no, you see this red error here. It's saying cannot read properties of undefined, reading remove. Well, we have not yet defined any index here. So I'm gonna here define a variable called Norway index equals 3. The reason I did not just pass 3 here is because now we have a variable that conveys some meaning that we now know that the index for Norway is 3, so let's remove that. I'm still getting an error here. Cannot read properties of undefined, reading remove. Okay, so the index did not help here. So what would help? Well, the thing is that this HTML here, this has been rendered after I have called my JavaScript and executed my JavaScript. So notice here I have this script tag in the title, in the head. If I move it to the body, that should fix it. So now we don't anymore have, wait a minute, which country did we remove? I think we removed the wrong country. We removed Germany, because that should be index 2 and not 3. Good. So now we are removing Norway from the list, but I don't really want to have my script tag here at the bottom. It is possible to have it in the bottom, and this is the reason why you usually put it in the bottom, but the latest changes to HTML allows us to use the keyword defer, and now my code will work. It removes Norway as it should, and if I hover over this, it gives me a tooltip saying that the script is meant to be executed after the document has been parsed, but before firing document content load. So we can circumvent that issue by adding differ to our script tag. So it will wait for the document to be parsed, and then we can start interacting with the DOM itself. Earlier you had to do all kinds of document ready, listen to the document ready event or whatever. jQuery had a nice way of doing that, and there were many different ways of doing it. But differ is now a new keyword which will help us a lot in the future. So in this class we will use differ, and after this class it is up to you to decide whether or not you want to use differ. Okay, so now we know that we can remove Norway. The index here is 2. I mistakenly put number 3, and there are a couple of things that are difficult in programming. Two things that are difficult in programming. First one is naming things. Second one is cache or caches. And third one is off by 1 errors. So we only have 2 difficult things in programming: naming things, caching things, and off by 1 errors. So here we had an example of off by 1 error. I was thinking about the third value, but I gave the value the incorrect index. What I could do is give the actual value, and here then do -1. So now I can give the human readable number for Norway and then -1, but this -1 might bring some issues. So let's just remove the third one. And if I say, for example, I try to interact with something that does not exist in the DOM, for example, index 5, there is no index 5. So I will get this error here. So what I can do is make an if statement. I can check if the country in this index exists or not. So now it should not give me this error, but it doesn't also remove anything. I'm gonna change this back to Norway so we can remove Norway. Excellent, and I'm gonna remove this console log because we don't need that. And let's keep that hello in here. Excellent. So let's read what's the next specification. Add some new country to the list. Well, that's nice. Let's add new country. So const new country equals, let's say, Belgium this time. And we can add it to the list by getting the UL element that contains the whole list. So let's get the UL. Const UL equals document get. Let's use query selector here. Query selector UL. That's it. And now we need to somehow add this Belgium to this UL element. So I'm gonna console log that we have actually the UL element. It's always a good idea to console log just to make sure that you are actually calling the correct value. So how do I add an li element to this list? I want to add one element here that looks like it belongs to the list. So luckily we had the create element interface or method. So let's say document create element and we want to give it the li element here, and let's store it into a variable. New country node equals document create element li, and then ul append new country node, and now we have an empty element here. So what we need to do, we need to add some value to this new country. So new country node dot inner text. That's because we want to just put the inner text, we don't care about anything else at this point. And let's give it the variable new country. And now we have Belgium on the bottom of this. Now, if I would want to add one more country, I would have to do all of this all over again. I would have to do all this code again. So I'm gonna do it. Const new country 2 equals, what country don't we have on this list? Let's put Ireland. And now we have the UL here, so we don't have to look for that. That's good. But we have to create a new DOM. So const new country node 2 equals document create element, and again it is an li element. New country node 2 dot inner text equals new country 2. Okay, we're getting somewhere. ul dot append new country node 2. So notice how we now have Ireland here. What if I would want to add 10 more countries? This would be lots of pain. So what if I just define a function? Function add new country, and let's have the country name here. And what I can do is just copy paste this code that we already created, and here only thing we need to change is new country to country name. I can then start removing code. I'm just gonna comment it out for now, and let's comment that out as well. Add new country and new country. UL has not been defined. Okay, we need to uncomment that so we get the second one working. That's good. We have Ireland here, and we have Belgium here as well. So let's also add Ireland here. And as I say, we should have 2 Irelands. That's good. Let me just remove all of these code from the bottom, and that Belgium, replace that Belgium with the word Belgium here. And now it's simple. So let's see if I want to add 10 countries, but I feel like even this is too much of repetition, too much duplication, having these function calls many times. So let's define a country list. Let's have Belgium there. Let's have Ireland, Scotland. What other countries could we put here? France. Let's add Mexico here, for example. Spain could be one. So now if we would want to add all of these, I would have to repeat again this line of code many times. Instead, I'm gonna use the for of syntax that we have been using earlier. Country of country list, and for each country add new country and the variable country. And as I save, we now have many countries here. So I can remove these two lines. Good. And I can do this with the for each as well. Country list dot for each. Then I get the function. For the function we get the variable country. And here add new country. And we pass the variable country that we just created. And we are doing the same thing. We are adding lots of countries to this list. But I can still further simplify this a bit. Because we know that we can pass functions to functions. So let's simplify it a bit. Country list dot for each. So for each of these values, call add new country function. And we have even further countries here. So now I can comment these out, and we should have our new countries: Belgium, Ireland, Scotland, France, Mexico and Spain. Belgium, Ireland, Scotland, France, Mexico and Spain here. So what I did here was I changed lots of repetitive code that we had earlier. I created a function for them. I moved the logic into that function, and now we can reuse this function all over again, all over the place. And I created this for loop, which will add a new country to the list. Then I realized that I can do the same thing with for each, because this country list is an list itself. It's an array which has methods. One of those methods is for each, which will run each of these values and do something with them. And when I did this, I realized that actually what I'm doing is I'm defining a function which gets called with the country, and inside that function I'm calling my own function which is called with the country. So I could remove this part, the curly brace, and that part to simplify it to country list dot for each add new country, and under the hood the for each will call this function that I have created with an argument which is the value of a single item on the list, and here we have that value. So let me just console log the value here so you can see what's happening. Country name. So we should have lots of countries here that we are adding. Now I can add countries, multiple countries, or just a single country, my own country. And I can do this wherever I want in the code. I have now created a reusable function. Which is nice. Just gonna see if there's any questions at this point. Doesn't seem to have any questions, that's okay. So let's continue. I'm gonna remove this. And let's see what is the next. Change the background color of the HTML to light blue, red, green, or something else. Okay. So we already know that we can access the DOM through JavaScript. So document get element by tag name, for example. Let's try HTML. Document, can we change the background here? Well, at least we get all of these values here. Now get elements by tag name, so we have to get the first element, and now we have the style attribute in our disposal. In style we have background color. I'm just gonna select that, and let's set the color to be light green. Let's see if we can do that. Excellent. What about green? Good. Do we have dark green? Yes. Blue. Red. I can even give it an hexadecimal value. Let's say FF3399, or let's set it as black, or let's set it as white. So hexadecimal value is 3 values from 0 to 9 and from F to F, I think it was. From A to F. So let's set it as some nice color that we can have. Let's keep it like that. So now we have changed the background color of this. I could again wrap this into a function and I can just define the color. But let's leave it as it is for now, and let's look at the next one. Change the background color of every other item in the list to gray. Okay, so again, let's find all the li elements. Const. Do we have countries here? We could reuse this one. Let's do that. I'm just gonna copy it here at the bottom. And now for each of these countries, let's change the color. So for country of countries, country style dot background color equals, let's say it as red. Now we have red for all of these. But we are getting lots of repetition in this code base now. Well, not that much, but still some. So we've copied this, countries equals document get elements by tag name, it's here as well. And we are changing a background color for some stuff. So I'm gonna create now a function to change background color, and I'm gonna give it a parameter of node, and then I'm just gonna copy paste some of this code here. So node.style.background color equals color, and I'm gonna pass color here as well. Now I can call change background color for the HTML node. Let's do that and give it the color it wants. And now if everything works fine, nothing will break and nothing will change. So still has the color. I can verify it by setting this to be black. But let's keep it as this better color. And also we have repetition for this countries list and countries. So here I'm just gonna create a new function called get countries, and let's return this. So notice how I can just copy paste existing code that I have, and nothing should change, nothing should break. And let's put countries here as get countries. So now I'm setting all the countries to be red, and I have reusable functions. Good. Just gonna move these under the function definition. Excellent. Let's move that here as well. So I want to keep my function definitions in the top, and then I use them here at the bottom. Okay. And I want to check every other country. So now what I need to do, the specification was to change the background color of every other item in this list to gray. Okay, so let's set them to gray. So it's now gray, and we need every other country. So let's do that. So what I need to do is I cannot use this country, so that should have const here. I cannot use this country, this for off loop. So I'm just gonna use our familiar for loop. Let I equal 0, I to be less than countries.length, and let's increment I. And as I save, nothing should break. Well, we have not defined the country variable now, so let's define that. Const country equals countries and the current item. And notice I can use country keyword here, even though I might have used it somewhere else as well, because this for loop now has its own scope. And for each loop, it will create a new scope and call it again and again. But I only want to use it for every other country. So let's just add a check here. And I could do this kind of modulo operation to see if this happens, if this works. And now it's not exactly what we wanted. We got halfway there. We got every other count now as gray. But I also want to see that the first one is not gray. So I'm gonna change here the if statement a bit to check that the modulo is 0. And now it's changing the every other country to gray. Even though the specification said to add it as gray, I want to use something that's a bit better color. So I'm gonna use the color that we defined earlier, and I'm just gonna change it a bit to see if we get some nice color out of this. Let's put that as, so now it's a bit better than the gray that we had. Just gonna find some combination of colors that looks good with the background color, but it seems that I am unable to do that. So let's keep it as such. This is a good enough shade of gray for now. So notice how I can play around with the hexadecimal to get different colors. Each of these letters represents a number, and that is a set of 2's. I think it, if I remember correctly, it's RGB. So the first 2 is red. Then we had green and blue. So this should be red. If I want blue, it should be 00FF00. No, that was green, of course, RGB, yes. So that is green, and now the blue. And then I can have any kind of variation of these. So let's keep it as such for now. I could wrap this into a function itself if I wanted to reuse this logic, but for now I don't need to reuse it. So let's just continue to the next specification. Use array and loop to add at least 3 more countries to the list. Well, we already did that, so we don't need to do that again. We have it here. So this is the task 1. Your code might look completely different. That's completely fine because you are still learning. If I would have done this code 10 years ago, or whenever I was learning, it would have been a lot bigger code. But knowing how to define functions and when to define functions and how to use them will get you a long way and will help you a lot. Here I have tried to remove repetition by defining functions such as get countries. Just a simple silly little function, does nothing major. It just gives me the list of countries. Then I don't have to repeat this line of code all over the place. And I could do the same for other items as well. I could create my own function for creating text elements if I would create new lots of elements, but for now this is enough because I'm only adding new country. I'm gonna jump a bit on task 2. I'm not gonna find out the population, but what I'm gonna do is on mouse over, I'm gonna hide and show these values here. For you, you have to show the specific population for each country and the flag, but in this, I'm just gonna show you how to show this information and how to hide it. So let's create 2 functions. First function to hide this paragraph, hide paragraph, document query selector, and let's find there is only one P in this element at this page, and let's hide it. Style hidden style display equals hidden, and nothing should happen yet, but as soon as I call this function hide paragraph, it should hide it. Well, it did not hide it, so let's see what's going on. We have the P element here, so we can debug, we can find is our selector correct. Yes, it is. Why can't we add display hidden to it? So I'm gonna pop this deck out so I can inspect these elements, and notice there's no style hidden here. So something is wrong now. I can also try changing this get element by tag name P, and let's see if this would help it. No. And let's see if I had the wrong CSS here. Yes. Sometimes this happens when thinking of many things, you put a bit wrong keyword because there's lots of things to remember when programming. Mistakes are how we learn, so that's completely fine. So now we don't see the P element here anymore. So now if I want to hover these and show the p element and hide it. So I'm gonna add a couple of event listeners. So first let's add an event listener for showing this paragraph. So document query selector all, and we care about LIs, and we already have these LIs, so we don't actually have to do this again. So const, we have also countries here already, so let's just use that, and let's create the for loop as well. Or we could actually use for each loop, for example, countries for each. We get a function with the country itself, but now these are DOM nodes, so we need to get the inner text. Const country name, so let's call this country node, and this just a country equals country node dot inner text, and let's console log what we have. And countries for it is not a function, so we have to use some other ways of doing the loop. Let's try for const country node of countries, and now I can just remove this for each loop, and let's see, and I need to remove that as well. So let's see if we get countries. Good, so we got these countries now. So country node, and we can start adding event listeners to here. Add event listener mouse over. Notice how my Visual Studio Code is suggesting me to use, or it's auto-completing me all these events that I can pass to this event listener, which is really good. If you're looking for some specific events, this is the way to do it. So I want to call the mouse over this element, and then I want to show the paragraph function, and let's show it. Document query selector p style display, and I'm just gonna reset it to nothing. So now if I mouse over an element, it should show the paragraph. Excellent. But I also want to hide it once I move out of this element. So the way I do that is by adding another listener, country node, add event listener mouse out, and we have the hide paragraph already, so we can just call that. And now it should show and hide when I'm moving. Good, but I don't like this code that much, this part of this code. So I'm just gonna create a reusable function again. Function show paragraph, and I can just copy paste this content and show paragraph. So I'm referencing now these functions, and notice how simple this becomes. And now as I move over and move out, it works. And I don't need this counter anymore, so that simplifies it a bit. So again, I am moving in and out. And what I can also do is I can chain these. So I remove the first add event listener, but not exactly. Sometimes you can. Apparently add event listener does not return a countering node, so let's just do it like this. Good. I'm gonna add a style here as well to the li elements, and let's just add margin top. Let's have it as 5 pixels, and margin bottom. Let's have 10 pixels in the bottom. No, that's too much. Let's have 5 there as well. So notice now that I move my mouse, it becomes a bit more clear what happens. Good. So we are hiding on page load. I could comment this out. So now we are showing it in page load. When I hover and hover out, it hides it again. But let's keep it hidden because that was the specification. Here I have set the background color for each of these items, and I have also set the background color for the whole page. And I have created this change background color function. So instead of doing this, setting the background color here, I could actually reuse our function, because we had the country, which is here. Notice how much simpler my code gets. It's still working. I can also remove this continue and add an else statement here. And now I can change the color of each row, and let's change the other one to be something a bit different. So now we have every other column in a bit different color. And if I start moving these function definitions to the top again, so now we have split this source code kind of into two. The top part will define reusable functions that we can use, and the bottom part will then call those functions. I can even do a bit more here. This will add a couple more lines of code, but it will simplify our code a bit. We can remove some repetition here. We can remove that part at least. Again, we can make this a bit more reusable. Set display, and for this function we give 2 values. We can do the same here as well. Set display. The first argument is the node, and the second one is the mode. These are sometimes called helper functions as well, because they help us to do some specific thing. in this case, I am changing the background color of a specific node or changing the display mode of some specific node. And I can create even a bit further. Let's create our own kind of well, let's not. Let's see what we could do here even more. We could remove this repetition function, get paragraph node, and it just returns document query selector and p. And now I'm pressing Ctrl D or Command D depending on what keyboard you have. Get paragraph node. So we have again simplified this a bit. And we still have a bit of repetition that we could get rid of if we wanted. But let's not do that. That's a bit too much already. So now we set a display for a specific node with some mode, and here we get some paragraph, which is here. We could also use global variable for this, but then when we're calling this, it might get some previous values, and sometimes that's not good. For example, if you've been doing the assignment 1, there's the coin toss, and sometimes you don't want to get the value of the checkbox in the first render of the first render, but instead you want to have the value as it is at the time when you're calling the toss function. So it's a good idea to have these functions that get the fresh copy of that node. Sometimes it's better to have it in the global, but in this case it's nice to have it here as a function that you can call. Okay. There's no questions in the chat at the moment. That's completely fine. And then we had here some events or some assignments to add a flag to the page and get some populations. But I'm gonna leave those for you. You should be able to do it based on this code. I know this code is a bit terse now, it's a bit compact. But if you've been following the stream, you should catch on what's going on here. So in first part I'm defining functions, and then I'm calling those functions with some values. And then task 3, just change the DOM of any website you want to change. It could be the GitLab page, it could be YouTube, Facebook, whatever. Find some element, for example the H1 element, and change the text of that element. And then do the same thing with Chrome DevTools. So I'm just gonna do that quickly here. Just gonna change the content of a single item on this list. Just gonna change it here. Change this to something. Or something else. Who knows what? Programming is fun. So I can select a row, I can press enter. Enter will open an editor, and save it. The second enter will save it. Or then I can right click, edit text, hello. I can right click, edit as HTML, and do a bit more stuff here. I can write HTML now. But enter does not work. So instead I have to click here and it starts working. So now I have h1 element here. So this h1 is the children node of this li, which is the children of this ol, which is the children of li, so forth. Excellent. And there's no questions at the moment in the stream. So that was the main parts that I wanted to stream today. I'm gonna push these codes to GitHub, to the gist. I'm gonna update the description of the stream to reflect these codes. Remember, there's the deadline for Sunday, I think it is, for assignment 1, and then next Sunday is the assignment 2. So you don't have much time to work on these assignments. So I propose to you that you start working on the assignments as soon as possible. There's lots of work to be done on both of the assignments. And the sooner you start, the earlier you will finish, and you will have more time to debug and more time to fix any issues that arise. The Sunday will come fast, so please work on your assignments, and also the next Sunday will come fast as well. And it's a bit bigger assignment, the next one, so make sure that you do both of those assignments. The assignments are on OMA, and the material are here on GitLab if you haven't yet checked these. So I'm just gonna scroll. I'm gonna navigate to the assignments. So if you click here on the files, here you will see assignment 1 and assignment 2. Make sure that you do this first assignment by Sunday and the second week later. They are open. You should start working on these as soon as possible. Read through the function requirements, the specifications carefully. Check out the returning instructions and the grading. And notice that there is a strict deadline on this second assignment. The first one doesn't have, but the second assignment deadline is the end of this period. So you will need to return it by next week's Sunday. I wish you the best of luck with your assignments and with tasks. We'll see on the class tomorrow, and I'll be streaming again next week. All right, see you all.